Okay, welcome back in Alive Now. I'm Austin Westfall, a live look at Gaza on this, well, it's now Saturday morning, Israel Standard Time, just past 5:30 in the morning. I've been watching this live feed for the past half hour or so. I've seen one blast take place. We do know the IDF continues its campaign. Some of its primary objectives, as usual, to eliminate Hamas from the Strip and to rescue the remaining hostages, living and dead. We have been tracking this war so closely, and this was an incredibly busy day of news relating to the Gaza war. Today, President Trump saying that he thinks that he has a deal to end the war. We're also learning who the White House wants to lead Gaza's post-war transition. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu also spoke at the UN today, a speech that drew cheers from some and led others to walk out of the room. All of this as President Trump and Netanyahu are set to meet face-to-face on Monday. Host of the Strap podcast and retired Marine Intelligence Officer Hal Kempfer is here to break it all down. Busy day, Hal. Let's take these stories one at a time. Trump says he thinks that he has a deal to end the war in Gaza. What does the Trump plan entail?
Well, I'm going to tell you, Austin, right up front, it's a little ambiguous if you listen to him talk about it, but it's smaller. It's about, I think it was like 91 provisions or sections of the Egyptian plan. This one's down around low 20s. I think 21, I heard today, was one of the numbers they put out there. Smaller plan, more limited, but basically, it's not this similar to other plans, release the hostages. Now, what's not clear, are they going to release them all, or is this going to be another phased release? That's one thing that they need to clarify today. And certainly I was listening to President Trump's remarks. I just didn't get that today when he was talking about that. So, release the hostages and then, a gradual withdrawal of Israeli forces, IDF forces as well. But the big thing with that is what's not clear is what comes in afterwards. Now, there's been a lot of discussion today that there would be some sort of Arab peacekeeping force that may come in, that this plan was being coordinated with the Saudis and some other Arab nations. And so there's a lot of discussion on this. And this plan may be tied to President Trump coming out and saying there's no way he's going to allow Israel to annex the West Bank. The problem with Israel annexing the West Bank is it makes it politically impossible for a number of these Arab countries to really operate or do anything in concert with what they're doing, in concert with the Israelis, because it's first off, it would be seen as a violation of international law, but also it'd be deeply unpopular throughout all the Middle East. So Trump saying that gave this a lot of wind in its sails, if you will, to push it forward. So that's kind of what we know. What I don't know is where do the members of Hamas end up? That to me is not clear. One thing that does keep coming out is that the Palestinian Authority is going to be boosted up to take some sort of role. Probably not right away, but it does seem to be centered on the Palestinian Authority being the leading authority. But then that goes back to the other question. What are you going to do with the leadership of Hamas? What are you going to do with the membership of Hamas? Where are you going to send them? Where are they going to go? Are they going to be taken into Are they going to prison? What are you going to do with them? So that's something that has to be clarified.
Do these look like tactical flares on our screen, Hal? What does this look like to you? Can you see it?
Yeah, I see it. No, that actually looks like something got hit.
Gotcha.
Yeah, that looks way out in the distance, and I think that was actually a strike mission. And based on the size of the explosive, or what I'm seeing, to me it looks like they hit it with something pretty large. Yeah. That's something pretty large.
And of course, it's tough for us to make
it's
out.
This is the oldest thing in the. Yeah, I have to tell you, having been doing this for many decades, when you're looking across some of these vast expanses off in the distance, visually, it is a little challenging unless you have some reference points to judge distance with some of these strike missions. So you're trying to figure out how big was the explosion. Well, it depends. It could be a smaller explosion up closer and look awful big. So and by the way, the desert will play tricks on your mind when it comes to distance. So
yeah, sometimes these feeds can be a little bit deceptive given the angles, given There's so many variables that can go into this. And of course, we don't have any idea what's going on in real time. We'll check the news wires to see if there's any more context about what the IDF has been up to within recent hours. Again, that's the second strike or blast, whatever you might want to call it. It's the second one I've seen within a half hour's time. Let's talk about the story on screen here. Tony Blair, specifically, he's a former UK Prime Minister. He's been involved in discussions about leading a post-war transitional authority in Gaza. What do we think the role of a post-war transitional authority will be, Hal? And what do we know about Blair's credentials for such a thing?
Well, you have to remember, he was the UN envoy to that area for about 7 years. He stepped down from that position in 2015 because, well, frankly, it just became untenable. He wasn't making any progress in it. But he, uniquely situated. He's always been deeply involved with the Middle East in a lot of different capacities. Obviously, he was a former British Prime Minister, so he held one of the most senior political posts anywhere in the world. And he knows the issues. He knows the problems, the challenges. He knows all the players, and he's widely respected. That's on the plus side. On the negative side, remember he went into Iraq with President George W. Bush, and that is deeply resented within the Arab world. Very much deeply resented with the Palestinians, who had an alignment or affinity generally with Iraq's president Saddam Hussein, and so he is resented in that regard, and that is a burden. With anytime he comes into these discussions, same burden he had before was the fact that he was aligned with the U.S. led invasion of Iraq. So he's got, but with that said, he seems to be. I'm getting the sense the White House is very comfortable with this. There are questions about how long he might be in this position. 5 years was being discussed, but then I heard 2 years, and then there could be anything in between where like 2 years and then maybe an extension. And we've seen that before where you put somebody in that position, and if it works out really well, then you just extend them another 2 years or year or whatever. But at some point, he would be an interim transitional figure leading a coalition committee government, if you want to say interim authority, that would then lead to the Palestinian Authority, whatever it might look like by then. You can't look at the Palestinian Authority today and say that's what's going to be there 5 years from now. It could be a very different type of organization. And frankly, he'll play a huge role in shaping whatever that organization will look like. And then they would hand over to the Palestinian Authority. But there's just a lot of work that has to be done. But this is detailed, tough work. There hasn't been a leader or a figure emerge from the Palestinian political leadership, if you will, that they see that could actually do something like this. They all carry their own political baggage, if you will. So Tony Blair comes in from outside, obviously with the Iraq thing I just mentioned. He doesn't carry all that political baggage. They feel he's smart, he's capable, he could do things. And he may be the consensus figure. But I just want to say it's not a done deal. Right now, it looks a lot like a trial balloon, and they're trying to see how this will float, if you will, with a lot of different constituencies, a lot of different potential stakeholders, if you will, in the region that have to come together and agree on it.
Would you agree with me that this seems like some of the most concrete reporting plans, if you will, of a day after plan? I mean, we've talked about this for almost 2 years straight now, and now we're actually starting to hear of ideas like an interim administrator of Gaza, things of this nature. Is this some of the most substantive day after talk we've heard?
I think from a governance model, yes, absolutely. We have not heard anything that even comes close to what the governance body would be. Now, there still are some big issues undone. The Saudis have alluded, though, to the fact that if this isn't worked out, you're not going to see Saudi Arabia, and they've kind of looked at some of their other Gulf state neighbors like the UAE coming in and putting in immense amounts of investment for rebuilding and stuff, unless the governance issue is really solved, at least in the interim. And so, yeah, I would agree that this is probably the most solid day after governance thing I've seen proposed since October 7th, period, anything that's come out.
So let's get to Netanyahu. Of course, we've been following the UN General Assembly all week. Netanyahu gave a speech in New York today. Did anything move the needle for you, Hal? We saw quite a few people walk out of the room. You're seeing it on screen.
Well, it was interesting. You saw a lot of the delegates walk out of the room, and then you saw a number of the delegations actually standing up and applauding the delegates walking out of the room. You see that there, which kind of gives you an idea that there were more people in sympathy with the delegates walking out than just those who did walk out. I thought Netanyahu gave a fairly strong presentation, if you will. He always does. But with that, it's not something that I thought really is going to move the dial. I think it was kind of expected, sort of baked in. Everybody pretty much saw this was what was going to happen. Interestingly, though, he throughout the Gaza Strip, they had huge loudspeakers set up that was broadcasting his speech, and their hope was that the hostages could actually hear him give his speech. And so he was using it as kind of a way to talk to the hostages, if you will, that might be underground or being held somewhere, that maybe they could hear what he was saying and it would buoy their spirits or something like that. I thought that was kind of an interesting idea. I don't know if it had any success. We won't know until probably sometime later whether any of them could hear anything. But I thought it was rather interesting. I didn't hear anything in it though that really nothing caught me by surprise. There was no big changes in there. It was pretty much what you would have expected, across the board. And of course, it was very condemnatory of all the countries that have recognized a Palestinian state, and talking about how that was counterproductive, and aligning that recognition with kind of rhetorically saying you're maybe not supporting terrorists directly, but you're kind of indirectly, validating what the terrorists have been doing, and kind of framing it in that sort of rhetorical fashion.
Speaking of Netanyahu, we'll be watching closely on Monday. Netanyahu and Trump are slated to meet. This is video of them meeting earlier this year, I believe. I guess the big question ahead of this big meeting, Hal, is what differences do the two of them need to work out if there is going to be peace in Gaza?
Oh, they have a lot to talk about, not the least of which will be the proposal that we just discussed. That's going to be something he's going to have to talk about in depth. And I think there's going to be a little closed door arm twisting with Netanyahu to get him to sign off and agree in a very forceful fashion that this is what they want to do, and to actually make some concessions that he doesn't want to make. Right now, it came out of his speech today. Again, he wants to militarily destroy Hamas. And if you cut a ceasefire deal with Hamas, well, then you haven't militarily destroyed Hamas. And so there is a certain difference there. They're not the same thing. So he'll have to deal with that. And then, of course, the other thing, which is very difficult politically for Netanyahu to deal with, is the annexation of part or all of the West Bank into Israel. Again, that is pretty much seen as a violation of international law, because the West Bank is seen as occupied territory. And under international law, a country that invades another country and then annexes its territory, that is a violation, of international law. And that's what we've been saying is a violation of international law with the Russians in Ukraine. So he's going to have to tell him, he's already said that he's not going to let him do that, or he's going to prevent him from doing that. However, Netanyahu is dependent on a increasingly more far right coalition of his cabinet members and his coalition government, and he has some very powerful voices within that cabinet who have talked about annexing either part or in its entirety the West Bank. And certainly Netanyahu has to this point been in concurrence with that. So he's going to have to put real pressure on Netanyahu to change his tune, and that could cause him significant political issues back home, because frankly, he could lose some cabinet members. And if he loses those cabinet members, and he's had this happen before, he could lose his ruling coalition, and then he could be out of power. And then you're into that problem of, well, he's got court issues that could land him in prison potentially. So it's going to be a very interesting discussion next week. Let's just say that.
We'll be watching on Monday. Hal Kempfer here with us.